What's up, everyone? Welcome to another NFL Deep Dive. Today we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars coming in at 27th in my power rankings. Now, this is a team that had a ton of hype going into last season, though if you've been following my channel for what's been the better part of a year now, then you know that I was very hesitant about this team. With the explosion of fantasy football over the last few years, Blake Bortles came in with an armada of great garbage time games, and then come draft time and real football, everyone was all shocked to see the Jags picking in the top 10 yet again. And in 2016, this team actually digressed. It was one of the worst offenses in the league and was 30th in turnover differential. The only difference was the defense was actually good enough that there was less garbage time for Bortles to sling it around and load up on stats against vanilla defenses. The reason I bring all this up is though the media has come to their senses for the most part, ESPN and NFL.com have them at 27th and 26th respectively. More flashy picks and free agent signings yet again have led some people into buying the hype again. Now, what it really comes down to with Jacksonville is, and you know what this team actually really reminds me of, I lease a house and our bathroom is all moldy. There's a leak in the roof which creates bubbling in the paint. So every 6 months or so, our landlord sends over a painter to flatten the surface and put a new layer of paint, which ironically, my bathroom is the same green that Jacksonville wears on Sundays. Anyway, this is what the Jags look like now. They have a fresh layer of paint with free agents like A.J. Boye and Calais Campbell. They have a collection of exciting draft picks in Fournette and Cam Robinson and Heisman finalist D.D. Westbrook. But in 6 months, when the season ends, how big of an impact do any of these guys actually end up making? When I look at this team, they still don't have the three most important components of what a modern-day football team needs to win. What are those? Well, one, quarterback, obviously. You need at least one of the two lower categories of quarterback, which in my opinion are your gamers, often categorized as game managers. These guys don't necessarily have the physical tools, but will put in the extra 2 hours a day to get any advantage they can watching film or whatever. These guys are guys like Dak Prescott, Andy Dalton, Alex Smith, who you at least know what you're getting on a weekly basis, and you can really build your offense around them and get some consistency. Then you have your point-and-shoot quarterbacks, often categorized as gunslingers. These guys are big, strong-armed guys who might not have the best pocket presence, but as long as the receivers can run the right routes within a good system and the QB can make the correct hot read, you will have some consistency within your offense. These are guys like Cam Newton, Carson Palmer, on the higher end, Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr. Of course, any quarterback that falls into either of these categories might develop a second, third, fourth plus trait like pocket awareness, release time, ability to extend plays beyond your first and second read. This is where you get into that elite range with guys like Matt Ryan perfecting his quick release, or Russell Wilson and his ability to extend plays, Phillip Rivers and his anticipation on routes, or top-end guys like Breeze, Brady, Rodgers, where you start talking about 4 or 5 plus traits like this. Anyway, I totally digress. Essentially what I'm trying to say is Blake Bortles fails to even meet the point-and-shoot category because he doesn't have any rhythm within the offense, and it's not all his fault. You can blame the play calling or offensive line just as much as him, but he certainly isn't creating anything for the team by himself. So this brings me to the second component, which is offensive line play. This was a problem for the team in 2015. They hardly addressed it. It was a problem this season, and they addressed it by swapping Kelvin Beachum for expiring veteran Brandon Elbert and drafting the next Cyrus Kouandjio in Greg Robinson. I don't expect much there. This line will struggle again in 2017, and it's going to hinder the offensive growth for this group, both in the run game and the passing game. That includes the growth of a guy like Leonard Fournette, who I happen to be a huge believer in. And the last key component of a winning team today that the Jags just don't have is a pass rush. You will not defend the West Coast offenses of today for 60 minutes of football if you can't get after the quarterback. If you don't believe me, dial up the Packers-Giants playoff game from last year. The Jags are pretty similar. They bring in Calais Campbell. He's an awesome player, but they're going to be asking him to play out of position as a 4-3 edge. As good as he is, he belongs somewhere between a 3 and a 4 technique, which is no further outside than head up on the tackle. He'll be asked to be a pure edge rusher. I'm not saying this defense won't improve this year, but it absolutely will not improve to a degree where they can carry a bottom 10 offense like Denver or Minnesota. With all this trashing of Jacksonville, I do think the defense will be a bright spot. I think it is somewhere between a top 11 and 16 defense. But because of that pass rush, I don't see them becoming a top 10 defense until they can really address that, which they have not really done a good job of, in my opinion. So when I did my game-by-game predictions for the season, the Jags came out with 4 wins, which is below their mark of 6 games, their over-under mark. So I'm going under there. They are 100-1 to win the Super Bowl, and 5.5-1 to win the division. I will not be taking either of those. So now we're going to move on and talk about the depth chart here. Just a reminder that what I'm showing you is my 2017 real roster, which is available for free on Xbox One. But if I mention a player that isn't on this roster in front of you, it's because Madden's interface for editing roster is far from perfect, and unfortunately I can't get everyone on here. So starting at the quarterback, we hit pretty hard on Blake Bortles already, so I'm not going to talk too much about him other than I think that this is going to be his last year as the starter here. I think he will struggle, but they don't really have anyone behind him to develop and see what they have. Maybe Brandon Allen gets some checks if Bortles has been really bad, but Chad Henne is the backup if Bortles goes down. I do think this team looks pretty hard at quarterback next year, especially in a deep class and a year that they'll probably finish in the top 5 or so. On to running back, I love Leonard Fournette. I don't love this offensive line, and I don't love this offense. So I think he definitely shows flashes, probably Todd Gurley-esque in that way. I think this offense is better than what the Rams have, but I just don't think he's going to blow up. We'll definitely see flashes, and future-wise, he could turn into an absolute superstar. I think the AP comparisons are all perfectly reasonable. He's such a freak. And then people seem to have forgotten about TJ Yeldon. He's definitely still a decent receiving back, got some shiftiness. At worst, he's a good third down back. I think we do see a decent amount of him this year. Chris Ivory will definitely be kind of pushed aside. I would not be surprised at all if he gets released and ends up being successful somewhere else, but for now he's going to be purely a reserve. Corey Grant still in there. Total speedster. Probably not a whole lot outside of a kick returner and maybe a guy that they run some screens to. And then Tim Cook, Marquez Williams, Itavius Mathers, all late round / undrafted rookies that will be coming in. Probably competing for one roster spot there. Moving on to receiver, Allen Robinson had a pretty down year last year. I still think he is one of the game's elite receivers. He is a free agent after this season, and if he gets the opportunity to leave, and think if he could pair up with Andrew Luck, and he is only 23 years old, he could go interdivision, which we see free agents doing all the time, and he would basically have a fresh start to his career. At that age, it's almost like coming in as a rookie on a new team, but he would already be one of the most established, best receivers in the NFL. In terms of this year, he's going to be the number 1. There's not a whole lot of question there for me. Allen Hurns dealt with injury last year. He's locked in as the number 2, a decent number 2. And then it gets kind of interesting after that. I mean, Marquise Lee's probably the slot guy, but they do bring in D.D. Westbrook, the Heisman finalist. Do those guys split reps in the slot? I know this team ran a lot of 3 wide receiver last year, and then they do have Rashad Green out of Florida State, and he's probably going to get some reps. So those 5, it's actually a pretty deep, interesting core. Then they got Neil Sterling. Aurelius Ben still there, still kicking in the league. He'll probably just be kind of that veteran body there. And then they do have a bunch of other names listed here on the depth chart. No one I'm familiar with. Probably no one else that's going to make the roster there. And then at tight end, they make the trade. They get rid of Julius Thomas, who wasn't really utilized in this offense very well. And that was to add Brandon Elbert. Probably a good move for Jacksonville. I talked about how bad their offensive line has been. But Michael Rivera comes in to be the number one receiving tight end. I don't think he does much at all. Mercedes Lewis still there. He's been there for over 10 years now. And then Neil Sterling, who's kind of a wide receiver tight end hybrid. Ben Koyak, 2 7th-round picks from last year, rounding out the tight ends. And then the offensive line, Brandon Elbert will plug right in and play left tackle. And Cam Robinson, what is he going to play? Probably guard, if I had to guess. I'm not a huge believer in him as a tackle. He seems like he doesn't fully understand the footwork and how to hit in the right spots to be a good pass protector. I think he projects best as a guard. I don't even think he's going to start this year, however. If anything, it would be at left guard, but moving through here, the left guard, Patrick Amama and Earl Watford, who ends up starting there, might not really matter. And then Tyler Shatley, Brandon Linder, probably their best lineman. Luke Bowanko, Demetrius Rainey, backup interior lineman there. AJ Can, not a bad guard by any means. Jeremiah Potazzi has been there for a while, hasn't really developed. And Chris Reed. Jeremy Parnell at right tackle, replacement level right tackle play from him, and then Josh Wells. So not a good group. The reason I'm not optimistic for Leonard Fournette is this offensive line. They have some okay pass protectors, but really not a bruising line at all. And then you get to the defense, starting with the edge rusher, Dante Fowler. I kind of talked about this edge as being a liability for the team. Dante Fowler did not play well last year. In fact, Yannick Ngakoue was a much better edge rusher than Dante Fowler. So who ends up starting at that left defensive end while Calais Campbell holds down the other side? I think it'll be about a 50-50 split, and I don't love either of them. And then the depth there, not a ton of guys I'm interested in. DeJuan Smoot out of Illinois was a highly productive pass rusher, an okay athlete with some finesse. He'll probably get in the rotation here. And then Hunter Dimmick, kind of intriguing, undrafted rookie. Does he get any playing time, or does he sit and develop? Jonathan Woodyard, Malachi Goodman. So just a group that is going to have to find a true edge rusher, because I don't think it's any of those young guys that are going to have the upside of a number one edge rusher. And Calais Campbell's kind of a placeholder, and I already mentioned that he's not a traditional edge rusher, and he's kind of playing out of position here. And then you look at the D tackles. This is definitely a strong suit of this defense. Malik Jackson and Sheldon Day, Stephen Charles, Mike Bennett. These guys will all get playing time, headed by Malik Jackson, Aubrey Jones as well. All these guys will rotate and kind of be line holders, but none of them are very good pass rushers from the inside. But their run defense was actually pretty good last year, and this group was a large part of that. So were the linebackers, Telvin Smith, Miles Jack, Paul Posluszny. This is a great Madden group, a ton of speed between Smith and Miles Jack. It's a good real-life group of linebackers, too. Telvin Smith just flies around the field. He's a slightly worse version of, like, a Levante David. And then Miles Jack struggled quite a bit last year. Didn't seem to be fully coming into his own after the injury. And we'll see how he develops. I loved him coming out, and I'm not going to write him off yet. His tape in college was incredible. And Paul Posluszny is just a mainstay there. And the depth, Blair Brown out of Ohio, I believe. I really like him, undersized guy. I actually think if Miles Jack continues to struggle, Blair Brown could compete for that starting middle linebacker job. And Adi Cole comes over from Minnesota. He'll basically just be special teams. Laurenti McCray also on the depth chart there. Moving on to the corners, Jalen Ramsey is phenomenal. Such an impressive rookie. You're not going to spend a ton of time talking about him. I absolutely love him. I don't think he has any flaws. As a rookie, it's hard to play corner, and I think he's going to continue to grow, and we'll look at him as one of the best corners in the league in about 2 years. AJ Boye comes over. I don't really like this signing, if I'm being honest. I think they could have spent their money elsewhere on the pass rushing front, or in terms of the offensive line. AJ Boye he's had a really good year, but he was playing behind one of the best pass rushes in the NFL last year. I think he's going to be exposed a little bit. I think he's going to be a very solid career number 2 corner, but they paid him a lot of money. I know Jacksonville has money to blow, but I think he's going to be exposed at times this year, but should be okay. Jalen Myrick, the 7th round pick out of Minnesota, runs like a 4.29. He's going to struggle in coverage, but he will make up for some things with that closing speed. And then Aaron Colvin, Josh Johnson, Doran Grant, Tracy Howard, Brian Dixon, a bunch of either young developmental guys or some journeymen. They do just recently sign Torian Nixon. I'd be intrigued to see if he gets on the field just because he's coming from that group in Denver that was very deep. And then the safeties, they sign Barry Church to replace Jonathan Cyprien. An intriguing signing, but probably a downgrade from Cyprien. Cyprien had a really good year and has been pretty good since he came into the league. Tashawn Gibson, it's nice to have sort of that mainstay guy back there behind all these guys in the secondary. Gibson's a very good safety. I know he had kind of one breakout year in Cleveland, has been pretty quiet since, but a pretty solid cover safety. And then rounding out the safeties, no one too exciting. James Sample, Peyton Thompson, Gerard Wilson, Charlie Miller. So that does it for the look at this depth chart. And we're going to wrap up this video now talking about fantasy football with Blake Bortles starting here. He is the 24th ranked quarterback going in the 14th round. I think that's originally I thought it was a little low, honestly, and I know I'm not high on Blake Bortles, but he does certainly have fantasy value when they get into garbage time. But then you look at the guys going ahead of him. I mean, I would take him over Sam Bradford, who's currently going ahead of him, but then Andy Dalton, Carson Wentz, Tyrod Taylor, Carson Palmer, Ryan Tannehill. So I think Bortles is going about the same range. If you're in a 2-quarterback league, you're definitely going to be drafting him a lot earlier. I wouldn't be taking any like flyers on Blake Bortles. I wouldn't expect him to reemerge as a top 10 guy, but he might definitely beat out that 24th quarterback position. He could easily finish 16th, 17th. And then at running back, Leonard Fournette going 10th among running backs, early 3rd round. It's a little high for me. I statted him out at 1,200 yards and 6 touchdowns. He's going ahead of Todd Gurley, who they're very close. It's all preference there. But then Isaiah Crowell, I actually like better than Leonard Fournette. I talked about him in the Browns episode. And then even 2 or 3 rounds later, I like Joe Mixon and Ty Montgomery better than Leonard Fournette. So I think it's a little high for Fournette in the early 3rd round. I would probably take him end of the 3rd. If it's a dynasty league, though, I love Leonard Fournette. I would take him early 2nd. And then TJ Yeldon is kind of getting written off. I don't think that's fair to him. He is still the handcuff-ish to Leonard Fournette. I mean, Chris Ivory would start to get involved, but he's probably going to be the 3rd down back there. So if you're looking 14th, 15th round, you're looking for a guy who could be an impact should injury happen, or maybe he does have a big role in 3rd down if you're in a PPR league. So I would definitely consider Yeldon later, which he's currently not being considered there. And Chris Ivory, no interest there, but keep an eye on rumors and such. If he gets released, he could definitely end up in a situation like Indianapolis or Green Bay and being a highly effective running back in one of those spots. At receiver, Allen Robinson going as the 15th wide receiver. That's about right, early 4th round. I think it might be a touch low, but there are guys like Doug Baldwin and Brandon Cooks going ahead of him that I like better. That I like Robinson better than. That was Baldwin and Cooks again. And then Allen Hurns going 69th in the 14th round. I think he should be going in the 11th or 12th round. There's a bunch of guys ahead of him that are less established, and Hurns is a red zone threat. We've seen him do it before. We've seen him finish as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. He dealt with a lot of injuries last year, and it seems like people have just decided to write him off. I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think you should still consider him, even if he's not a flashy pick. Marquise Lee going undrafted. If you're in a full PPR, I think that's a good play. Later round pick. Blake Bortles going to have some kind of an underneath guy. I know Allen Robinson gets a lot of work there, but Marquise Lee, not a bad player at all. And then if you're in a dynasty league, keep an eye on D.D. Westbrook. I don't know if I would draft him or not, but he does have some upside. He's a very fast player. At tight end, I'm not taking any interesting flyers on Michael Rivera. And then this defense, if you're in like a 16-team league, then I would say this is a top 16 defense, but they do struggle to take the ball away, so I'm not really interested in the Jags defense there. So that is going to do it for the Jaguars review. Let me know what you think. If there's Madden ratings you agree or disagree with, if there are players you think I'm missing, or anything else that you want me to be covering in these videos, let me know. And I'm looking forward to the next episode, guys. We'll see you there.